Today we have Evan Hu. Evan Hu, I actually work with him a bit with Startup Calgary. He's one of the, he's on the board for Startup Calgary, but it's great to, actually I haven't really, I don't know him as an entrepreneur, so this is today's kind of a chance. So Evan is a serial entrepreneur. He built a company in the 1990s called OmniLogic.
Correct.
And ERP Consulting, sold it in '98 to PwC. And he did a bunch of things after that, one of them being building another consulting company called Ideaca, which he recently sold to Hitachi Business Solutions, which was sold like 2 months ago or something like that, after 13 years. Evan is also on the board of A100. He has started multiple startups. He's a professor at MRU, and I consider him to be the king of lean startups in Calgary. With that, we can get started, I guess. So maybe we'd like to kind of start from the beginning, and maybe tell us a bit about, what did your grandfather do? What did your father do? What's that?
Okay, way back. Really way back. Well, I was born in Kingston, Ontario, right? Hometown of Don Cherry, so it's very interesting. I did play hockey too, but I don't believe in his hockey philosophies at all, so that's just for the record. My parents actually came to Canada in 1956. So my grandfather, my father's side, is a poor peasant farmer from just west of Shanghai. And my mother comes from a wealthy French-educated mining family. So they both were losers in the Communist Civil War. So ended up as refugees in Taiwan, and eventually they made their way to Canada, where they went to university at UEnd. That's where they met. And I was, like I said, I was born in Kingston, and my father was an associate professor there, and then eventually moved around a little bit as he found better positions and moved up the ladder, but spent most of my childhood actually in Winnipeg. Went to high school for 2 years in Toronto, much to my chagrin. So I was in grade 12 when we moved, so I had another year, grade 13. And though I did meet Brad Johns in high school, after all these years we reconnected in the BC world here. I finished up in Toronto, and I thought I should head out to Alberta to go to university and take engineering, because it was booming. It was the late 70s, and Alberta was riding high, and I thought this was a great place to go and get an education, get a job. And of course, the minute I show up, NEP was announced and the economy crashed. I basically worked in department stores, drove pickup trucks in the summer, worked in kitchens, and basically had to make do for a couple of years in university. Didn't really get the engineering experience I should have until almost my fourth year. So I was a mechanical. Eventually graduated, but graduated right in the teeth of a full-blown recession in this province, and young engineering grads not getting work. I did get a contract job with a junior petroleum company, basically typing in numbers into spreadsheets, doing reservoir calculations. And when that project was done, I was let go. It was a contract, and there was nothing to do. So I decided, I hedged my bets, and like all students, I decided to go back to school. And I did a master's in engineering, specializing in operations, research, and supply chain. And while I was doing my work there, I got a research project with a engineering fabrication firm in Edmonton, where I was working with them on project scheduling, because they were building large pressure vessels and equipment for Syncrude and other places. And I was able to apply some of the optimization techniques there. One thing led to another, and the classic thing, they recruited me out of my master's program. I never was able to go back full time, so I worked at this engineering firm and went to school part-time, and it took me 3 years to finish the degree after that. But so I cut my teeth in process engineering design, but I didn't really like the industry. It was always what I call cookbook engineering. And if you have to look back in the sort of mid-'80s, was, in my opinion, very misogynist. And I would have to say very racist environment. If you were of color or an individual, then basically the stereotype was you could do the work, but you weren't allowed to be a manager. And that's my opinion. So those of you that were in the time machine back then probably had worked in an industry. Also, it was a very ageist industry, I thought. You had to prove your chops 10 years, 15 years, or whatever, before you could be considered a senior, right? And I was of the opinion I'd already figured out in 2 years what you basically had to do to be an intermediate engineer. I was just starting to repeat my work. And so I decided this computer science thing was kind of interesting. So I'd been working on inventory management systems there too, and Esso down in Calgary was recruiting. And I was the perfect fit for them. I had an engineering background, I knew process piping, pressure vessels, construction, and I knew this newfangled thing called supply chain. And they were going to do supply chain systems implementation, so I joined them and spent the next 2 years between Calgary and Cold Lake implementing an SAP ERP system, which was one of the first implementations in SAP in North America, and I just got lucky. I don't know if many of you guys know anything about SAP, the software firm, but they're one of the largest global software firms, probably the big unknown one. Everyone knows Microsoft, everyone knows arguably Apple software and hardware, and other companies like Google, but SAP is up there in terms of revenue and size and reach, but pretty well unknown outside of the business community. And I became expert in the technology within 2 years, 3 years, and I sort of flew past a lot of the people that were well versed in it, and I realized there was a business opportunity there. So by that time I was about 28 years old, and happily ensconced as a systems analyst at Esso doing my thing in SAP when Esso decided to downsize the company. And they had a voluntary package. So very good. You got C-capped. You were at Esso? Oh my God. Okay, C-capping, right? So if you remember, everybody in the company was scheming down at the Second Cup and Grand Malise, down in the food court. Should we leave? Because they gave basically a month of salary for every year of service. And I'd only been there almost 3.5 years, and that means I was only going to get 3.5 months salary. And I thought, okay, I should stick around. It was a great working environment. I still think quite highly of Esso. They've given me great training and opportunity, but things were getting a little plugged because of the downsizing. Well, of course, a lot of middle managers are looking over their shoulders, and there weren't many good opportunities to go outside, so a lot of people were going, yeah, maybe I'll stay. Anyways, a bunch of us thought about setting up an SAP consultancy. The interesting thing at the time was the word consult was a euphemism for being unemployed. So if you're unemployed, you're a consultant. What are you doing? Oh, I'm a consultant. Oh, really? Yeah, okay. So it wasn't seen as a real vocation, a professional vocation. Management consulting was just a sort of loose term.
So before then, you didn't have much entrepreneurial experience. Did you do anything
Zero.
As a kid, or
I did the lemonade stand.
You did that, right?
Yeah, I had a dog walking business.
Okay.
I was an entrepreneur. No passion for it. It was all necessity.
Yeah.
Right. My father didn't have connections to anything, and he was completely non-entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
There wasn't an entrepreneurial bone in any side of my family. It was all education, academics.
Yeah.
Not to stereotype, but the tiger dad, tiger mom thing was going on, right? Violin or piano, get your grades up. Not got 95 in the exam. Where did the other 5% go? Yeah. So there was that thought of entrepreneurism was a dirty word in our family.
Yeah.
So it was like, it's okay. If you have to settle, because some of my father's friends were actually entrepreneurs. It was a classic immigrant situation. They made a PhD in biochemistry, but they couldn't get a job.
Yeah.
So they owned a couple of apartment buildings or whatever. So that was there. I noticed that. And the funny part wasn't that money motivated me. I said, they seem to be doing quite well. So, but no. So,
yeah.
Anyways, the interesting part is I didn't have an entrepreneurial goal, and that's actually stopped me. I was looking at the risk, and life is pretty good here. Maybe I won't do it. But one of the guys pulled the trigger, Rod, and went out on his own. And kept on bugging me every month. Water's warm, come on out, it's okay, don't be scared. There's no risk. And I said, well, that's no risk, what are you talking about? So eventually I cracked after 8 months of calling. CCAP had ended. So here's the worst part of it. I left without a package. I got no money. But I did eventually jump to go join Rod, and we started this little company, and it was actually called SysWorks. And we worked as consultants to build up a little war chest, and we made a pledge. Rod used his package money, and I went without salary for 2 years. So that was my ante out for the thing. So buddy, macaroni and cheese, no vacations. I had my beater car. But it wasn't a big deal to me. I didn't have a whole lot of expensive interest. I paid yearly pocket, like bicycle around. So watched cable TV, which was actually, I had an illegal hookup, so. No one from Shaw here? It was only semi-legal because my apartment, they didn't unhook it, so I just kept it. Anyways, I was entrepreneurial on that, man, and I wasn't going to waste money on anything, but yeah, I ate a lot of, you know, a lot of boiled rice and Kraft dinner, but we had a plan from the get-go, though. We weren't just going to be independent consultants. We knew that the industry was lacking consultants, and the only way to get ahead was to create new consultants. And my view was, if I could figure out and be a decent consultant with a product in 2 years, I should be able to hire other people, train them, and get them up to speed, and start putting them out there.
Yeah. So how did you find your first clients?
You know, it was word of mouth. I did everything I could to. It was basically like guerrilla marketing. I did everything to get my name out there. If there was a public speaking event about SAP, I was there. If SAP, the company, needed someone to fill in, I filled in. Right? I could teach their programming language. I knew the programming language, and I knew a lot about their middleware. So they used to fly me around because, in the day, SAP was a German-based company. Very few qualified people in North America, so I knew more than most of the North Americans did. So, you know, if an instructor got sick and couldn't teach a course in Philadelphia, I would talk to my client and try to weasel a couple of days off and fly out there on a red eye, land in Philadelphia, teach for 2 days, fly in the red eye back. Because when you're 28 years old, you can do those things. But the other thing I did too was I made a point to do things for free for SAP, the vendor. So, and when I started to present, the clients would notice, who's that guy over there? He seems to know what he's talking about. And then, of course, one thing would lead to another, and you'd find work. Yeah. And I said, we're on with ours. I said, I'm not too proud to eat anything out of the dumpster work-wise. I said, any opportunity is a good opportunity. We just literally organically found work bit by bit, and then we eventually took a chance and hired our first 2 staffers, which they were paid out of my salary and Led's package. Yeah. So that was a huge gamble for us. And then we made, small side bets, but every time we did something, we plowed the money back in. And like I said, it was a lot of moonlighting, but we had a plan. Like a lot of people were in those situations too. And we were very conscious of not taking the money and running, because you can make a good living as a consultant and take that money and put it into your own pocket. But we said we were going to build a company. This is the way we thought we could do it. I also spent a lot of time with friends that worked at other major consultants, like the DMRs and the system houses and whatnot, and sort of exchanged notes on how they operated their business, because I didn't know much about that sales side. Yeah. So I was doing the classic entrepreneurs, the innovators skill set. I was observing. I was asking a lot of questions. I was experimenting with little things. Yeah. And see what would work.
This is to figure out the sales side of things?
Sales cycle, everything about how the industry actually ticked in the background. Yeah. So I understood, for example, I needed to understand how the SAP account execs got comped. The compensation was going to drive their behaviors, and I wanted to understand what made them go, and how could I help them. Because I also knew it was very much that, I helped them quid pro quo. If I helped them, they would help me, most likely. The other thing, too, is Rod and I were very adamant that we did good quality work. So we never argued with our clients about if they didn't like the quality work, we gave them money back right away. Yeah. And that held us a good steed, because a lot of consultants feel very angry about, you're going to pay me, I don't care. And I said, I think Calgary was a small town then, and still is a really small town, in the sense that we're only 1 degree of separation, especially with LinkedIn and stuff. Reputation, I think, is everything. Yeah. So it took us 3 years. We got up to 12 employees. We merged with another small company, which was our first big mistake, because I didn't understand. Rod and I were on the same page in terms of our investment strategy, our level of risk. We thought our partners were, but what they said and what they did were 2 different things. And we discovered their top risk tolerance was much lower than ours. They're very good people. What they did, they had a small business too. They've been in consulting, and it never clicked on me. They've been in consulting for 10 years and only had 6 employees. Yeah. And it never occurred to me is that they were completely risk averse. Mm-hmm. And Rod and I had plans to expand, and they didn't. Okay. And that was a big miss. Yeah. Right?
What made you merge? What was changing?
They had a lot of access to a lot of accounts, which they weren't really utilizing. They had a good reputation. They had skills that we didn't, complementary skills. It was like all good on paper, except I completely missed that.
Yeah, so they were basically putting more money in their pocket rather than reinvesting it.
And reinvesting it.
Yeah.
And so we had a mutual divorce 18 months later.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a starter marriage. Just, there's no big assets, there are no big deals to unravel. We just went our separate ways, rewrote some contracts, and continued to work. We were still partners, and in fact, they would partner with us in the future as we grew, but they all stayed the same after all those years, right? But it wasn't a fit for them. They just were not interested, and I didn't recognize that difference.
Yeah. They're looking more for like a lifestyle type business.
Absolutely, that's a really good point. They were lifestyle entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
They were entrepreneurial, but for them, lifestyle was really important. And Rod had a different mentality of it wasn't growth at all cost, but growth was our major driver, and we were much more willing to take much higher risks, and they did more higher than they wanted to. So. And we basically, in a lot of ways, I guess that way we outgrew them, right? But I put that lesson behind. I always make sure that having a failure never stops me from taking a risk. I just need to analyze what went wrong. What are the lessons I can take away? How does that affect my future thinking, right? And just because I made the mistake that time doesn't mean I won't repeat the mistake, or that I won't try the same thing, because conditions may change, right?
Yeah.
Because over the years I did do other mergers and acquisitions, and many of them turned out. Kind of track record on those things is sort of 3-to-1 actually so far. 3 goods to 1 didn't work out, or was whatever it is, or less than satisfactory. But each one was a slightly different case.
Yeah.
But we were going along, and we hit a crossroads, and I had to take a project in Montreal. So Rod was holding down the fort in the Calgary office. We had 12 employees, and then we stuck our necks out. I won a project in Montreal.
Yeah.
And I rolled the dice on a sales engagement. I did the same classic thing. I was working for SAP. I was teaching a course for one of their big clients in Montreal, and SAP set up a meeting with a big prospect, because the prospect wasn't very happy with the consulting firms they had talked to already, and there was these. We were basically seen as a renegade, weird outfit, because we're the only independent firm in Canada. They were all the big companies, IBM, System House, PriceWaterhouse.
Yeah.
So we were the alternative, and as an alternative, I also had a motto: there's no way you're going to succeed if you do what the other guys do. So you have to be the clear alternative. So that was kind of my mental motto. I've stuck to that in the consulting world. I don't know if it's always applicable in the product world, but certainly in professional services, if you're the same as everybody else, why would they go with you? Right? So I wanted to stand out. So I made a personal guarantee. The CIO interviewed me, had a good chat. Our 1-hour chat turned out to be 3 hours. I missed my flight, ended up having to take the red eye. We were like to teach another course the next day in Calgary. I still remember the meeting. But he was sold on me, and I made an impassioned pitch based on me, and I knew he was going to check the references. And I made the pledge that if you picked our firm, I would guarantee to be your project manager for the next 2 years in Montreal and with my family. And I also knew something back to observing and questioning. I knew my competitors were not actually going to do that. So something interesting in the consulting world is it's known as the bait and switch. So you have the Halo consultant come who's wonderful, do the presentation, the client falls in love with them, but you're not actually going to serve that person up for the job. And what you do is you talk the client into taking somebody else. And I knew that was going to happen. So I basically put the pledge, it's my promise, you can have me. And I knew my reputation was about as good as anyone else. And you know what, if they could come up with somebody as good as me, I knew we were done.
Yeah.
But, so I moved to Montreal and built the Montreal office. So the Montreal office was not built on plan. Our plan was not to build a Montreal office. Our plan was to go to Toronto next, maybe Vancouver. Made more sense, but opportunity drove us that way, and we weren't going to look the other way. Had a great 2 years, and after I was there for 3 years, I built up 40 consultants, and Rod had carried Calgary to about 25, and then we gained 2 more partners in Toronto, which after that, without spending too much on the OmniLogic years, we just kept on doing the same thing, and the big thing, while everyone else was rating each other for talent, we were growing it. So I spent a ton of time. I created training programs, I created a whole bunch of stuff, I taught them. And there's some personal sacrifices, right? So a lot of my hobbies went away. So I love cars. Didn't work on a car for 2 years. While they were in storage, I was in Montreal. They went away, right? I made a very specific pledge that I wouldn't impact my family life. So my pledge was I'd never work weekends, right? I've kept that. I mean, I get very angry when I have to work a weekend and don't want to see me by. So 5 o'clock Friday, it goes away. Other than that, you know what? If I have to work during the week, I'm a prolific midnight kind of a guy. So often I'll just wake up and do work for 4 hours and go back.
So that's the best time to email you.
Yeah, actually, you know what? Yeah, if you email me through, there's a good chance I might answer. It's a little weird. I do a split shift sleeping, right? So I guess my advice is you find your own rhythm, right? But one thing that really makes me angry is how North Americans are so stuck on a 9 to 5 and no napping and siestas in the afternoon. I am super productive basically first thing in the morning from about 7 o'clock to about 11. And then I pick up steam around 9 o'clock again and go till 2, 3 in the morning. But I have to sleep.
Yeah.
So if you catch me at 2 in the office, I'm probably got my head rolling around. I'm one of those guys, right? No offense, I'm not bored with you, but I could be talking to you and falling asleep right then. And as an entrepreneur, I can get away with that. If I worked in the big corporate office on it, Hugh guy, there he is again, sleep at the desk, right? So
then you grew the company to 500 people, and
yeah.
This was between 91 and 98.
Yeah, we PriceWaterhouse actually bought a minority share of us in the mid-90s. And we were basically their attack dog company because they were losing. They basically did that. We beat them 3 times to the punch in a row on proposals. And their senior partner actually, so one of the guys that joined my company as my partner, and he became the co-CEO with the 2 of us. Rod kind of stepped aside. It just wasn't for him. Mike's father, Mike Sr., was actually a partner at PriceWaterhouse.
Yeah.
And one of the partners said, "Isn't that your son's company?" They just beat us up 3 times in a row. So they put up the white flag and said, "Hey, are you interested in a partnership?" And we said, "Well, let's talk." So I started forming some of my own rules, and then one of my own. So one of mine is not working weekends. The other one is, the other one I started developing was I'll always take 3 meetings to find out. So I'll always give you the first one, and if I like what I hear, I'll give you a second, and I'll go for a third. But I'll invest 3, but it starts with the first. So I said, well, let's have a meeting. Let's find out. I don't know what they're going to say. So they came to the table, and of course, the terms that they wanted to do were horrible. And I felt like I was bargaining in the marketplace, right? And I had to work my way down. But at the end, we came to a mutual conclusion, and they signed an agreement with us. They bought shares in our company, which is unusual for a partnership. And we took their consultants into our company. So we operated for almost 4 years as an arm's length corporation within a partnership. That's when we grew it. The big thing they gave us was essentially an open line of credit. We had one of our biggest issues was cash flow, and we were financing everything out of our own pocket. And if you think about it, try to go to a bank and get them to loan you money for consulting. No assets, nothing other than people and contracts. So we'd already basically put our homes up, and I said I was never going to do that, and I did it, but it wasn't for startups. So one of my rules was I am not going to mortgage my home on an idea. I wasn't okay, but I did mortgage my home to get a line of working capital, right? So that was tough. And when price stepped up, that was one of the things. We just said, we got to take some risk off the table. We've been at this for almost 5 years, and here I am, but my house is still on the line. And our payroll had grown, right? Our monthly payroll was over almost $1.5 million, $2 million a month. So, and that's one thing we'd seen. One of our competitors actually blew themselves up that way. They completely mismanaged their tax situation and their receivables, and they had a huge contract go south, and into a dispute. Their client wouldn't pay. They were in arrears with IRS in the US, and so they went bankrupt. And they were a profitable business. So all of you that are in B school, that's a lesson. They always talk about managing your cash flow. And luckily, Rod, my partner, speaking of which, he did a lot of things and that I didn't do well. He was very detail-oriented, which served us well in the early years. Later on, we kind of outgrew that. But in the early days, he watched cash like a hawk. So he looked at our receivables. He was always doing aging reports and understanding where our cash stood, right? Just think about it, we were hiring people and training them. So we would be paying them 4 or 5 months of salary before we could get them on the job. So we're carrying, you know, all that salary. Then if they start with a consulting job, you can't bill until they've been there a month. They go to another month. Then they have net 30 days. And then they often don't pay. Because the guy that's supposed to sign is on vacation, or they lost the invoice, or there's a dispute. So 11 months later, we carried a guy 60, 80, $100,000 worth of salary. And when you're growing, you're hiring these people, you've got to carry like $1 million in salary sometimes or more. So when you do the numbers, it gets quite frightening, right? But like our competitors didn't do that, and we only found that afterwards, because all of a sudden they were there one day, and then we heard the doors were closed, and their consultants were phoning us. It was pre-internet, really. Some people used the internet. Yeah. Anyways, so we knew something had come up, but then we found out afterwards what the story was. It was no cash management.
Okay. Yeah. And then, but then eventually PwC bought your company.
A whole, because what happened was PriceWaterhouseCoopers, which was another lesson learned. So we did not have I forget the legal term, but a change of ownership clause in it, a significant change of ownership.
Yeah.
It never occurred to us to put it in. Price knew that, but didn't put it in, so they realized we weren't smart enough to put it in. Of course, it's all's fair in love and war, right? And so there was a major control. The Coopers and Price merged. Without telling too many stories out of school, in those mergers, there's a lot of musical chairs between all the leaders. And the leader that was picked was not a friend of ours. He was basically a rival, and he made our lives very difficult for a couple of years. And I just said, okay, that's it. I don't need this. You know, I don't want to work like this. And you know what? Being an entrepreneur, running your own firm spoils you. We had only one responsibility. That was to our staff, right, and to ourselves, because we were the shareholders, right. So that changed. So Mike and I, by that time, had become the co-CEOs. We had more than 600 consultants, 100 million plus in revenue a year. We're starting to get into global activities and stuff. And that, to be honest, was some of the things that I was doing. I just really didn't interest me anymore. So we left in 2000. So I'd already been sort of fooling around in the sort of mid-late 90s. And I was looking at some other opportunities, and we set up probably one of the craziest, most insane investments I ever did was a thing called MapleMusic.
So you left OmniLogic, and PwC kind of took over. But you were successful ultimately, or?
Oh yeah, you know, I had shares that were big. It was in that industry you get an earn-out agreement. So when they buy you out, you have to stay and earn it out. I walked away from some significant money the last couple. I had 2 more years there, and I just decided to leave it on the table. It wasn't worth it. I said life is too short for that kind of money. I wasn't interested. Okay. And so MapleMusic was something we've done as basically a kitchen top prototype. So we were fooling around on our side on commerce servers, and make a long story short. We hired a band for one of the OmniLogic parties. We had a lot of. I try to keep the young consultants happy. I like parties too, so so we hired a band to play, and one thing led to another. Having beers with the band after, they were crying their beers about how they just lost a record deal. I got to remember this is pre Napster, pre BitTorrenting, pre MP3. It was still in the CD vinyl age, and losing a record deal was tragic. Like it was a tragic blow to any music addict, and they didn't know what they were going to do. It was kind of like, oh my God, we have to actually go back and get real jobs maybe. So we talked to them about creating a e-commerce site for music. When the idea was, it was pretty radical in 1998 or whatever at the time, was that we would sell CDs and hard stuff through an online store, right? And maybe, because I'd heard of this thing called the MP3 format, maybe we could do downloadable music, because there were desktop music players. You guys remember Winamp?
Yeah. They just went bankrupt.
Yeah, exactly. So, or they went under, right? And I think someone just bought them. Anyways, Winamp.
My childhood history.
There you go, right? And you know, and I'd seen this thing called Napster, and I said, "There's the future." I didn't know how Sean Fanning was able to get away with it. He wasn't. He was completely legal. Like I said, how do you have servers serving up? Anyways, so I'd seen all this stuff, and we were starting to play with MapleMusic, and so we decided to throw in and create MapleMusic. which I learned a ton. I learned one thing is, man, you really got to go in your eyes open. I did not know much about the music industry. I thought I knew something about it, but I didn't realize, it was a difficult industry to work in. It's extremely personal. I would say by our standards out in sort of traditional Fortune 500 is very unprofessional by our standards. A lot of agreements that are broken, the rules of conduct are completely different, and relationships are extremely important and often kept secret. And we learned the hard way of how difficult it is to do business. And it's closed. I mean, their mentality is closed. They had the classic, so those of you who have read Clayton Christensen's Innovator's Dilemma, they were completely blind to disruptive innovation for all the reasons. They had an incumbent system that they were comfortable with, making lots of money. In fact, they were in their heyday. They were reaping in massive rewards with CD format, huge rewards. And then this thing called DVD was coming along for the video side. All these companies were making huge profits. They couldn't see the end of it. To think about it, at that time, Blockbusters was just getting into the Fortune 500. Yeah. Right? Well, where's Blockbusters now? Right? So we made partnerships, and in fact, we had record companies make investments in us, which ended up crippling us because their investments gave them rights to tell us, give their opinion, and they stymied us into the entry into digital music at the end of the day. It just wasn't in our interests. Our interests weren't aligned with theirs. Yeah. So I eventually, my investment's still there for all these years. Their MapleMusic is now, sadly, it's the largest independent record label, which doesn't say much for the state of music. Okay, so the largest independent label has revenues about $20 million a year. Right? To this day. To this day, right? If you look up MapleCore.com, which is the holding company, there's multiple labels under there. It's a mom and pop business now, right? And the industry's changed very much. So, music's okay, but interesting enough, they're almost 14 years later. I don't have an exit. So I've done well on paper, but when you want to buy some shares in music, I'll have a chat with you. I can probably cut a really good deal. So if you love music, you got a great opportunity. But
and you were operating this out of Calgary, or?
No, so that was the other problem. So we started in Toronto.
Yeah.
I was doing a lot of traveling to Toronto, and we did a lot of stuff with the internet and stuff at the time. So, but as the idea was, we were going to set up a Western organization, and it never got there. I underestimated the Toronto-centricness of my staff. Southern Ontario was their world, and that Western Canadian thing was not a priority. Okay. And it was really obvious to me, and it never became a priority. So I just said, I learned I'm not going to push a rock uphill. It's just there's another lesson learned for me was you can't make people see your vision. When they're ready, you can talk about it, you can question them, but it's a bit of a modification of that Buddhist adage: when the student is ready, the master will appear. They weren't ready to hear anything I wanted to say, and I said I tried that route. I wasted a lot of energy, got a lot of bruised foreheads from smashing my head into the wrong wall. I just said, I learned my lesson. So I left. It's out there, like I said, I have an investment. I love the guys over there. It's an interesting business because it's in a trap, right, with the rest of the industry. So they're always looking for new ways for new revenues. But at the end of the day, one thing I didn't understand was the dynamics of record labels. It's a lottery ticket by business. Yeah. Every artist you invest in is a lottery ticket. You don't know how it's going to turn out. It's that much risk. It's not like drafting sports players. You got a really reasonably good chance that you draft the first round, they probably will stick. There is no combine system that looks at musical artists that give you that kind of comfort. Yeah. We got lucky once in 10 years. We signed Taylor Swift. So Taylor Swift actually saved the label, but we lost Taylor Swift because we're agreeing with Universal. There's a long story behind that, but now she's Universal's property. So lots of hard lessons learned. Great lessons, except that I don't want to go back to music. So they're stored away, and the models and the lessons learned, a lot of they're still sticking back with.
And now you're a VC now as well. So how would you compare VC with a record label? VCs to some extent.
Well, I'm an LP with a VC fund. Brad's the managing partner, so I'm hey Brad. I am a participant, and when he calls me, I help out to look at things. But it's sort of my introduction to the VC world. 'Cause I've been on the other side raising money from VC. So OmniLogic was bootstrapped with my own money. Maple, we started with our own money, then we got some VC money. Then I raised money for Ideaca through VCs as well. So this was kind of my first foray to the other side.
Yeah.
And so I got a bit of insight into the way that things are done on that side. And I'm going to consider maybe when the next fund is raised whether I want to step it up and participate more. And you know what? I've made some interesting choices in angel investing over the years. So
So is it like similar to picking like a music band or picking startups, or it's different? Or?
I don't know. There's that level of risk. Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think the process is a little more scientific.
Yeah.
You have, I think, more of a emotional attachment. Certainly, music is a very passionate business, right? And it's hard to judge passion, right? Because you can do all the technical things, write music, and you won't go anywhere. And there's no rhyme or reason at all. I mean, why do some bands hit the home run out of the park, and why do some just languish? The classic example, by the way, Chair that everyone cries in their beer buttons and tragically hit. Right? There's no reason why that band should have a mega platinum global band, but it could never make the breakthrough. Platinum albums in Canada, year in, year out, great touring band, had all the pieces. But why did REM hit it big globally, and they did it in the same genre, same era, same quality of talent, same stage presence? Right, there you go. There's some similarities, obviously, between winners and losers and companies, but that emotional piece is something that I think sets it apart. So some industries are like that too. So you have to look for that, right? I just didn't understand it to that level until I got into it.
Yeah. So going back then as an angel investor, you mentioned.
So yeah, I've done some angel investing, which angel investing is tough. And you really don't have VCs should have a proper methodology. Most VCs do, not all. Yaletown's got a funnel process, and they have criteria for investment and all those kind of good things. When you're an angel, you're dependent on your own discipline to do that. And I think and I've seen quite a few angels kind of fall in that. You invest because you also have some passion in what you're doing. And sometimes that passion can blind you, right? So, my track record as an angel is not that good, right? I've only had one mediocre success, and the rest have been flops, right? But that's the ratio. What's the ratio of an angel investment? 10 to 1, you figure? Yeah, at best. So it's a tough thing, right? And I allocate a small amount to angel investment, and I have my own investment criteria. One of my investment criteria now is I have to be really interested in what they're doing personally. Because there's a lot of good deals I think come across the table, and I've learned that if I'm going to hurt myself, I might as well hurt something I'm interested in, as opposed to something that it's a good financial deal. Yeah. Because the likelihood is that I am going to hurt myself.
Yeah.
So.
What are things that you're interested in that you're invested in?
There was a music startup. I did my own thing with a video gaming company, which did we ever hit so many, timing is also important. That's a really good segue, because I think I invested in a small video gaming company.
It's called
Wreckage, yeah. And there's still flailing out there.
Yeah.
But, it's a tough business, because it was all about timing. When we hit the market, video gaming was starting to come apart as an industry.
This was what year?
We started in about 2008, and by the time we were about to get going with things, and we've been slowly working on things, and then I wasn't adherent to the lean startup at the time. I just sort of heard the beginnings of that, and we made a bunch of classic non-lean startup mistakes. So we tried to build too much of the game too soon. We were industry outsiders, and I had some connections in the industry. I didn't realize again how close the shop it was. Unless you cut your teeth in a studio somewhere, it didn't matter if you were connected to studio guys, you weren't really going to be given a chance. And also, in Canada, most of the game studios at that time were console game developers. They didn't understand the app world, and they certainly didn't understand internet web-based games. So one of the big success stories that we were sort of, we watched with some jealousy was Club Penguin out of Kelowna. So I forget what they got acquired for by Disney. It was $700 million? Yeah, something like that, right? They knocked it out of the park with a web-based game, and we had a great concept, and we couldn't get any traction. Now, I guess in hindsight, I was smart enough to pull the plug on it before I put too much in. So from a sort of lean perspective, we built too much into our minimum viable product, way too much.
And this was desktop?
It was internet-based. It was an internet-based MMO game that had in-game purchases.
Okay.
So we were way ahead of the curve in North America because I'd observed a bunch of things in Korea, Japan, and China that was going on. I thought we could translate the model over. But I couldn't get anyone to believe me at the time. It sounds stupid now in hindsight that no one would believe me, but literally I had meetings with EA and a few other studios, and they basically kicked me out of their office. Right? And I completely underestimated the closed-mindedness. And it was timing. I wasn't thinking about it. They were ready to listen, right?
But why do you need them if the games were on the internet?
Well, the one thing I grossly underestimated was the cost to do art development. I did not know enough about the industry.
What was the game called?
X-Chain. It's a long story. X-Chain. So we got a prototype. There's probably still a prototype floating around in the web somewhere of a couple engineering prototypes kicking around. But I grossly underestimated the level of the artwork. Okay. I also grossly underestimated the professionalism of the art industry. They were some of the hardest people to ever manage. Just creative people, the bane of my existence. So, again, I was out of my comfort zone. I was used to working with business analysts and developers and engineers and accountants who were, generally speaking, fairly logical, right? So, people have a lot of ego in our industry, but you don't know what the ego of art types are like. That's just, and maybe I'm tainted, and maybe I only had one sample that had a bad experience, but it was a horrible experience. And I realized I was out of my league. And we needed to raise a lot of money without getting the numbers. It was like I had to recast the numbers.
Yeah.
And I said, there's no way I'm going to finance this. I didn't want to. I probably could have, but I thought it would be a very foolish thing. And in hindsight, it was right because what happened was, so timing's everything. We missed the crest of the internet game, which was a very small crest, and apps came along. Because the iPhone, it just came out. And we were all playing with it, but we didn't know where it was going to go. And we didn't realize, again, after all these years, I think, okay, I've learned all this stuff. I've observed a bunch of stuff. I should be smart enough to see it. I didn't realize how fast Apple was going to take off. Things like Angry Birds took off, or Farmville took off on as a Facebook game. I was still in denial. I'm like, why is people are saying, what? I don't get it. What I didn't get was, just because I didn't get it didn't mean it was any good. Stop thinking that. Oh yeah, I'm a big console gamer and a PC gamer. I'm a gamer since I was in the arcades, right? I wasted a lot of money and time, by the way. Or even a Defender. A useless skill. All those hours for nothing. But what's a good point? I was blinded by my own experience. I've been working hard I've been working hard most of my life to try to, I'm very aware of that. Even with my awareness, I'm just still falling into that trap, right? Yeah. So it's like Snapchat. I don't know if you guys, have seen Snapchat and heard that those guys turned down $3 billion offer. Nuts. But I was surprised at how fast Snapchat took off. Right? It still surprised me.
Do you think the founders of Snapchat were as equally surprised, or?
I'm sure they were.
Yeah.
Or maybe they were big dreamers. Who knows? I don't know those kids that created it, right? Yeah. But nevertheless, they saw something that I didn't.
Yeah.
They took advantage of it. They were in the right place at the right time. And, who knows whether they're right to turn it down? Yeah. Personally, I think, you're not to take the $3 billion, right? Because they got a long way to go, and the market they're dealing with is extremely fickle. Right? But nevertheless, more power to them. But to this day, I'm you didn't see that. I didn't see the evolution of the app business. I picked some bets elsewhere. But, I did start Ideaca, which is a big part of my life, which I haven't talked about. But without getting too much details, it's almost the same arc as OmniLogic, and I actually thought, well, I'll get into consulting again. We're going to do something different this time, and we ended up doing something the same because I'm good at it. So instead of SAP, it was general development, Microsoft, and some management consulting, and business intelligence and other things.
Yeah.
And the irony was, it took us, almost 10 or 11 years to get to this rough same size it took us to get OmniLogic in 5.
Wow.
So I didn't get better the second time. So
So you started Ideaca early 2000s.
yeah, and that was a rough blow because we were into, soft economies. Then 2016 and 2000 things started taking off here. And then we got whammed by the recession.
Yeah.
And as you know, consultants are the last hired, first fired, right? Because we're there for contract reasons. So that was a tough blow. But we did a different company, different times.
Yeah.
Learned new lessons all over again.
Yeah.
But
and you raised money this time for Ideaca.
yeah,
What
we did.
made you raise money for Ideaca?
Well, we actually wanted to go bigger, faster.
Yeah.
And it didn't work out. Right? Here we thought, okay, if I bootstrapped OmniLogic, can you imagine if I had a couple $1 million? And I put my own money in too, so we had a pretty good war chest.
Yeah.
Imagine what we could do, $6-7 million. Twice as long, half the business. So it didn't work out. Timing, other market issues, and we knew that with SAP. One part we did get lucky. I mean, we were in the right place at the right time, but I did recognize it. Right? What's that Thomas Edison quote? Opportunity looks a lot like overalls and tools, a lot of hard work or something like that. That's why people miss the opportunity, because it looks like hard work, and so you walk right past it. So, because I know back in the SAP days, a lot of people talked about, at ESO, there were tons talking about setting SAP firms.
Yeah.
Right? And same when, we were setting up an internet-based sort of business intelligence and other things firm, a lot of people talked about it, didn't do anything about it. And Ideaca, we did get it up to a $60 million revenue company. And Hitachi contracted Hitachi's attention, and they decided they wanted a presence in Canada, so they purchased us. So got the exit there.
Yeah. Were you actively looking for someone to acquire, or?
No, ironically we had, because I don't know if most of you are aware, but VC funds have a lifespan, 10-year lifespan.
Yeah.
For the investor's sake, you put your money in as an investor, you want your money out, so they basically worked on an arc. And we were at the end. They've been with us 10 years. The fund hadn't done well. It was an internet bubble fund. So they got hammered, right? But by that time, they had liquidated all their investments except for 2 of us. So one got liquidated. So we almost had a deal in 2008 when the recession hit. But the deal was pulled off the table literally at 1 minute to midnight. It was the day that the stock market fell a zillion points.
Yeah.
And we got the call the next day. Deal's off the table. And then we took a massive revenue hit because, like everyone else, our business came to a halt, so we had to rebuild. The fund came to an end. The VCs wanted out. We had to engineer a deal. They gave us an extension, but we had to find some senior debt capital financing, a bunch of other crazy machinations. For a guy who's not a finance major, I think I've now got my Bachelor of Commerce in Finance now. You need to get a master's. But anyways, we managed to make it work out. We got essentially the bridge worked out. We bought our VCs, and gave them the option, the limited partners, to participate in our company, and a third of them did take us up on the offer. And 18 months later, Hitachi came in. So we just said, we're just going to operate it. We're actually planning on dividending out for the first time our income to shareholders. And then Hitachi came down, and yeah, it's the classic thing though. The minute Hitachi showed up, 3 other guys showed up because they were all waiting. We had, by the way, there every year, because we were owned by VCs, there were offers coming in, right, and most of them under market value, right. And Hitachi was the first one that was very serious because it was strategic to them. It's the classic Mac. They were a strategic buyer. We were available. We had a strategic position in the market they wanted to be in. And they made us a serious offer, and then of course everyone else went, oh crap, they're moving, we better get in there, and of course they moved too late. And we wanted to honor the agreement with Hitachi because they came in good faith offer, and it turned out to be, as they said, so it all worked out. But it did take 6 months to close.
Yeah.
Right. So.
And what was strategic exactly? What contracts or?
Our position, we we are one of the strongest Microsoft AX implementers in North America. And it's not a very big market, but Microsoft sales are growing rapidly in that area, and they wanted to move in there. And their practice was 20% of ours.
Sorry, Microsoft implementers or
Microsoft implementation. So it's consulting, implementation, Microsoft ERPs.
Yeah.
Plus we had business intelligence, but they had no presence in the US. Microsoft Business Intelligence, they figured they could use our consultancy.
Okay.
So there's a lot of other reasons too. But yeah, so it was the right time, and the shareholders, we all voted. It was a more than fair offer. And yeah, what did one of our investors say? When someone serves tea, you drink tea, right? So the deal was good, and it was time to exit.
Yeah.
And I finished up on just before Christmas. Started working on
Nice Christmas present.
Nice Christmas present. I was doodling on some other startup ideas, teaching in the university.
Yeah.
So I'm keeping super engaged and doing things like this. Yeah, I started up a bicycle company in the meantime too. What the heck? 4 hours a week. I time boxed it.
And so, but one question I had about Ideaca is you raised money for it, but I thought VCs don't invest in consulting companies.
They did in 2000.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. Ask Brad. Do VCs invest in professional services companies? Certain points of view. Points of view.
Okay.
Generally not.
Yeah.
Don't see. We had so that's the interesting thing. We had a track record.
Yeah.
And I was going to put in some serious money in my own, 6-7 figures.
Yeah.
So that made all the difference because VCs felt if I had that significant sort of significant skin in the game, then their money was probably safer.
Yeah.
And we had a track record.
Okay. So, yeah.
That was the difference.
Yeah. You were Canadian VCs or US?
Yes, out of Toronto.
Oh.
Nextel and Trust.
Yeah. And then what made you so now go into the bike building company?
That was just a moment of insanity, and just it was more of a passion play because it was a bucket list thing. I thought, you know what, I love bicycles, I've raced bicycles, I actually brazed up some frames and thought about a bicycle business and realized that was a good way to take a large fortune and make a small fortune out of it. But I decided to do it anyways. So I thought, you know, I would follow the lean startup approach to this thing.
Yeah.
I built a couple prototypes, tested them out, tested the market, and managed to convince the manufacturer to make a small batch. It's selling through the internet only. Of course, learned a lot of lessons about my partners. Of course, the classic thing is I have resilience, I have fortitude, and my partners didn't. And when the going got tough, and it was not tough. I mean, this is a little business, but any other side of risk, they bolted. It's like, hey, I'm here again by myself. What's with you guys?
Well, what do you mean by going at a tough point?
One of my partners, you know, basically he had another business, and this is how I got it. He was manufacturing stuff and bringing it in and selling it through the internet. He had a good sized business, right?
Yeah.
Probably close to $1 million in turnover.
Yeah.
And he was going to come in as a partner, but he got in a little tight with his business and then hit the panic button, and he was supposed to do order fulfillment. Like he had a little warehouse and stuff, and he was going to fill my orders, and he pulled out. I got 100 bikes, and he was going to pack and ship them.
Yeah.
I'm pretty good at packing and shipping boxes now, by the way, but because of that, I said, you know what, I'm gonna ratchet down my SEO campaigning, kind of, I'm not going to get the word out. I'm the only entrepreneur that has been discouraging sales. I said, I do not want to ship bikes out of the basement, right? So I sold a lot to family and friends and wrenched them up in my basement, and it was more fun. I mean, for me, building bikes is therapeutic. I'm very mechanical.
Oh, so you built them yourself?
But they were partially assembled.
Yeah.
But they were customizable. So when I sold to family and friends, they had their choice. Of course, I was being overly generous, but I actually like doing it. You know, like you know, some guys like to putter in the garden or whatever, or go golfing. I like to build bikes.
Yeah.
My house is full of bikes, and it was better than working on cars because bicycles have you get some almost like immediate gratification. 2 hours later, you have a fully built bike you can ride. Car, you're talking hours. You know, you pull the engine. You know, 8 weeks later of 4-hour sessions, you might have an engine, maybe.
Yeah.
So, that one's crawling along. The problem is it at a point where I can really hire someone to take care of it. So I've left it as a slow burn. It's kind of fun. I time box it to 4 hours a week. I chat with other enthusiasts because it's an enthusiast bike. It's a French style touring bike. Make a long story short, and I learned a ton. It gave me an excuse to fly to Taiwan, to go to factories, go to trade shows. And I know it's a little bit weird, but that's my vacation. I love that stuff. I love meeting them. You got to understand the Chinese bike industry in Taiwan and the bike industry in Japan are basically full of enthusiastic entrepreneurs. They're all small businesses, and they're all quite passionate about what they do. And it's fun actually meeting these guys. Not all of them. Some just make it because they had to stuff, make a living, but a lot of them are really enthusiastic. It's just energizing for me to go there.
Yeah.
And I boxed it, so it's this big. My losses are capped. I did some quick napkin calculations, and the worst I can do is take the bikes apart, sell all the parts on eBay. I hired one of my sons to do it for $10 and unpack the boxes.
And what do you like? What's the value proposition, or why would someone buy your bike? Is it just a brand thing, or is it...
the bike is unique in the market, strangely enough, at the price point. So it's a French style loaded touring bike for $1,600.
Yeah.
So the only way you can get one of these is you go to essentially custom frame builder.
Yeah.
And they usually sell for $4,000 to $6,000. It's a tiny market. Tiny addressable market. Those of you who business model canvas will see this. It's a dumb market to go after. Because but I'm not here to make it. It's like a hobby that pays for itself. At worst case, right? So, and like I said, it's like I'm just a curious guy. So I said I really want to know what's going on. And there's a bit of that. Hey, I get to rub shoulders with industry giants. You do. So it's kind of like buying a hockey team so you can hang with hockey players, right? So that was the kind of and it was an opportunity. It was the opportunity to experiment with some stuff. I love to go and experiment, and so I learned a little bit more SEO techniques myself. Buying things through Alibaba, negotiating through the internet, engineering drawings, a little bit about SolidWorks and CAD/CAM. The heck, right? Why not?
Yeah.
So
and then so you got into lean startups in 2008.
yeah.
Right? So when did you start kind of applying that? What you did?
So Wreckage wasn't going well, the video gaming, which is kind of ironic. We knew the name was ironic. We didn't know how ironic it was going to be. And I was searching for a better way. I'm a methodology wonk too, so I love methodologies and process and trying to do things better through science, right? And there's got to be a better way. We really messed this up, and I thought we were being smart. I honestly thought we had tried to do it the smart way, and I didn't. Obviously, I made some significant mistakes, but we were doing things the way we thought it should be done, right? And I tripped over like anyone else in the lean, which is serendipity. I was just surfing around the net and tripped into the lean startup, and Eric Reese and Steve Blank were just starting to blog about it, which was kind of a bit of a wow. This is what I've been searching for. They're talking about all the things that I had done wrong and watched other people do wrong, and they had a theory of how to deal with that, and it was very science based, right? And it all came together. And also married. I'm an agile development proponent, and a extreme programming proponent. So a lot of the things that they were doing fit into my kind of thinking. Now, and also the other weird part for me, because of my supply chain, I'd done a lot of work in lean manufacturing back in the 90s. So I already had it in the back of my head. Of course, those are the components of the methodology. It was like, but this is applied to startups, right? Yeah. So that was like, wow. I said, why didn't I think of it, damn it? And then he wrote the book, and it was a bestseller in the New York Times. I said, Jesus. Again, someone else put it together, right? And I was stunned by the fact that I had all the pieces and I didn't do it either, right? Yeah. So did a lot of other people, but more power to them. But I said, this is something good. And so I started experimenting with it, and started actually applying some of the techniques at Ideaca when we used to launch new business lines. So I took the lean approach to starting new business lines. So it was an entrepreneurial application. Yeah. And I've been working on like my little bicycle company, doing a software startup right now on the side.
That's Brown Thing, right?
Yeah, which is not a working name.
Okay.
My God, I'm trying to find a .com that has meaning that isn't cyber squatted. And the guy wants $500,000. It's really hard. So we've been working on this thing part-time for the last couple of months. And I'm not leading it. Brian Reimer, who's another fellow serial entrepreneur, Brian and Alice just had a vocal their company acquired about 6 months ago, I think. 7, 8 months, longer than that now. It's a year now. Yeah. Time flies, doesn't it, when you're having fun? Brian and I have been working on noodling and pivoting, and we think so. We've been doing it the lean approach. It's just been great. We realized lean, in fact, staying and true to the lean methodology is hard work.
Yeah.
Right. And I love to do seminars. I'm happy doing seminars on lean startup stuff.
So you're familiar with lean startups and has actually tried to apply it?
Yeah.
Okay. So not too many people actually.
Get up there, buy the book. Not that I get a commission, right? Or go. You actually don't get buy the book. It's all over the internet, and blogs and stuff. But
and so, what are the hardest? You said it's hard to apply.
No, it's not hard to apply. I mean, I think the methodology is straightforward.
Yeah.
It's hard to stay disciplined because some of the basic tenets are really hard to live to, right? So the constant. The best visit plans, never can withstand first contact with the customer. In other words, you really got to get out there with a product prototype, a lean small MVP. Get out there, get it tested, and come right back, and then revisit your hypotheses. It's easy to fall in love with how smart you are, right? And think we got the solution. We just got to build it more. And as with IT guys in particular, it's easy for us to make things. So we start making things, and we get ahead of ourselves. Before you know, we spend 3 weeks going down a hole, and we discover no one really wants that feature. And that's where the waste comes in. So we waste. It's not that the feature isn't any good, technically, but we discovered that our customer segment we were trying to address has no interest in it. Or worse, and I've seen this happen a lot. You don't realize the actual underlying mechanics of the industry because you didn't get out there. What you thought was the industry mechanics isn't the true industry mechanics. You discover, let's say, your super app actually solves a problem they don't want solved. So I ran into one of those things as we were going through this. We discovered, the buyers like the market inefficient because that's how they get work. That's how they make their money. It's inefficient. By creating this functionality, we're actually making it efficient. They hate it.
You're basically, getting them out of a job.
And they're smart enough to realize that. So who we thought in one case who our buyer wasn't going to be our buyer, right? And that was where the lean startup is. That's one of the lessons that Steve Blank pounds the pulpit with is get out of the office, right? Get out there and get the data, right? And I like to say the answer's in your data, right? It doesn't mean you don't have passion, you don't have creativity. But you got to really be careful how much of your own Kool-Aid you're drinking, right?
Yeah.
And after all these years, after all my ups and downs, I still have to keep teaching. Brian and I were lamenting, said sort of like I can say non-picky things. Damn it, we thought we were smart, we thought doing it wrong, and we still shot ourselves in the foot. So what did we do? We got ahead of ourselves, and we were supposed to we were trying to push out an MVP 1 week to every 2 weeks. And then in November, we got kind of caught up, and then we let things slide. Someone caught the flu, so we went to 3 weeks. Pushed out the MVP and got shot to pieces in our tests. Made some horribly wrong assumptions and had to go back to the drawing board, which was great.
And what kind of tests were there? Do you in-person interviews or online?
No, we put it online. We had used some social media to get it out to some people.
Yeah.
Select crowds. We didn't, we didn't want to wear out our group.
Yeah.
And the results came back, and they were not the results we expected. The classic stuff you learn, right? You get things that you thought you had a hypothesis they were going to behave this way. They didn't behave that way. They actually behaved this way. And there's some things they really liked that we didn't think they would like. And it's like, oh crap, right? And back to the waste. The waste is, and if you talk about lean startup is all about elimination of waste. We wasted time. We wasted capital or money. And we built some features that weren't necessary. And back to the things that we think about features that don't work, but it's really features that you don't need, right? And we should have been building other features. Now we had to go back and build those features. Hopefully test that again and confirm that before we continue on. And the hard part is staying disciplined in those tight cycles, right? Because you do slip into, we know it's best, right? And especially guys, it's interesting because the team that's been assembled, we're all sort of doing this the classic. We're pitching in our sweat equity time and a bit of money, and it's great, doing software startups is wonderful nowadays. We use not that I'm pitching for Amazon, but we use the Elastic Beanstalk cloud development platform. I mean, that platform back in 2000 would probably cost us $250,000 to assemble. And now we're paying, $500 a month for it, right? And, our cycle times can be low. We're wireframing with the Mockflow, and we built the infrastructure up, and we're capable of ramping our application without getting too far into what the application is about right now, but we can ramp it up to 10, 15, 20,000 units just like that. Then we can worry about scaling, but that wasn't even possible. So it's great, but we're not taking as much advantage as we should. We should be cycling faster and getting out smaller continuous releases to test.
And as a successful entrepreneur, is it kind of harder for you to present like a basic MVP or to kind of see that people don't want to prototype or to present something to the
It hurts. I mean, it's your baby, right?
Yeah.
And I lecture at the university. I always tell, don't fall in love with your baby, right? And my baby's not like you just don't understand, right? You can't see its inner beauty, right, or whatever. When your baby's not pretty, it's not pretty. It's just not going to go, right? So I gotta find a better analogy. Some people don't like the ugly baby, but it works for me, right? But it hurts. I mean, you put your intellectual thought into it. It's a little piece of you, and that's something part of your ego. You got to get used to getting squished, right?
Yeah.
And after all these years, I still like, oh, right? No one loves us, right? And back to the drawing board. And there's a fine line. I mean, some people ask me the question, well, what about persistence? What about your vision?
Yeah.
And I said, that's overrated, right? And I actually think that too much of the history is written by the victors. In other words, guys that talk about, I stuck to my guns and everyone told me I was wrong. And I proved I was right. In most of my experience, and this is just my opinion, is that most of those guys are blowing bullshit, right? They are only telling a quarter of the true story, right? And quite a few of these guys I know my business is pivoted all over the place. OmniLogic, Ideaca, MapleMusic. Where we started, where we thought we were going to be 5, 10 years later, it was nowhere close. Maybe it was roughly the same direction, but we were over here somewhere, right? Because just things happen, right? You just don't understand, right?
You're basically responding to the market.
Well, it's more. It's everything. It's the learning part. So it's not market is one of the things, but it's the learnings, right?
Yeah.
Because if you look at lean startup, the whole premise is your business is nothing but a bunch of hypotheses. You have guesses. You've got to get out there and test those, right? And get data to validate or invalidate. Because a lean startup is really not about the product or the service that you're trying to build. It's about a search for a business model that works, right? And that business model can go all over the place. Because the reality is, you're foolish to believe you have all the answers. You have all the data, right? And it is. Once you get into that journey, you discover it. Anyone that's been in a startup, you're like, my God, we knew so little when we got into this, right? And even industry veterans find themselves in situations. It's rare to find industry veterans who can repeat themselves, right? Unless they stay in a very narrow focus. And it's possible. I'm not saying it isn't, but it's rare.
And then tell me about, you mentioned sometimes in your lean startup presentations about time versus money versus personal energy.
Oh, okay.
So
that's my little spin because so the thing that the lean startup guys always talk about time and money and how precious they are, right? So the idea is not to waste them, right? And so they talk about time is more valuable than money because you can't get time back. You can always raise more money, maybe. But you have the opportunity, you can't raise more time, right? So they talk about that aspect, but what they miss, in my opinion, is energy. Because I think, you only have so much personal energy, and you only have so much goodwill with family and friends. And most of us will fatigue, and you just run out of runway. And I've seen many of my friends and colleagues pack it in, right? Because they wasted too much of that, and not recognizing that you do have a runway. It might be 2 years, it might be 4, it might be 8, right? So you got to recognize that and say, you know what, I got to be smart about it. That's what I like about lean. In general, it talks about waste. So, like I said, the general statement about lean is elimination of waste. The focus has been on time and money, but I don't think they spend enough time thinking about energy. It weighs more on me. I don't have the energy I used to have. Right? I can't pull it all night. I'm just too old. Right? I have family commitments. I have other things in mind. So do my partners, right? But even with that, we can figure things out and we can be smarter about it, right? Make better choices.
Awesome. And then, so what do you think about what's Calgary and the startup ecosystem and building a company here? Kind of what are your thoughts about that? People here building companies in the city. Should they go bootstrap approach, raise money approach? What are there certain industries that would work better here or not? Can you build any type of company out of Calgary? But
There's no magic answer. And everyone knows that, right? I could talk in some generalities. I mean, I'm a believer that if you're in the energy sector, you have a better chance of raising money for sure, right? People are more tuned to that, right? So if you are, if you've got a great opportunity you've identified that's related to the energy sector, the chances are that you could probably find some love money and some angel money. But you're still going to have to bootstrap. I mean, VCs and institutional investors aren't going to come in. And that's not where their capital's going to be deployed, right?
Yeah.
So seed money, energy sector, you got a good chance. If you're not in the energy sector, it's much smaller, right? So, my belief is you have to bootstrap. You got to be willing. But, I mean, I think investors like to see if you've invested yourself. The only investment has been time when you're driving around in a late model BMW M5. The investor's going to go, and you want me to throw in 150 and you're driving around a $120,000 car. Oh, maybe it's on payments, but let's say you bought it in cash. Maybe you should sell the car first, right? But I struggle because I'm always stunned by the valuations given and the money thrown around in Silicon Valley. It's still happening, right?
Yeah.
And it's just a different world down there, right? And I think pound for pound, our startups are just as good.
Yeah.
In fact, I'd have to argue that most Canadian startups are better.
Really?
Because we're just leaner and less greedy. I mean, there's just some crazy stuff that goes on down there.
Yeah.
And I think it's a lot of spaghetti at the wall, hoping it sticks. And there's a lot of spaghetti to throw down there. We don't have much. I don't think a longitudinal study's been done. I'd be really curious to see in terms of effort invested in startups and what our track record is. I got to say it's probably no different, even though they have way more war chest there. But there's an ecosystem here, so I put a plug in for the ecosystem. There is the A100. There's Startup Calgary, there's Startup Edmonton. There's some incubator spaces like Accelerate YYC, and there's the assembly here. There's successful entrepreneurs, and you know what? There's a lot hiding out here, by the way. And most people don't know the history of this province, right? It's just that we're overshadowed by the oil and gas industry in general, right? It's funny. Years ago, PriceWaterhouseCoopers published a great wall poster for the BC startup ecosystem. It's been one of my pet projects I really want to get off the ground. But what they did was, it's amazing. It's a big poster, and it shows all the tech startups in BC. And it showed the little roots, though. It showed that these guys did this in 1987, and then they sold their company and crystallized out. And then two of the founders went here to this startup, and two other founders went this way, started this company up, which then split to this. There's a couple of dead ones, right? Some acquisitions, but it was just a big spider web. What kind of really impacted me was the visual. It was like, holy man, there's a lot going on in high tech in BC. Now, I don't know how much of you know that how much high tech goes on in BC, but a lot goes on in BC, much more than we probably are even aware of out here in the general public, right? Well, Alberta has a similar thing. It's smaller, granted. I don't know what the magnitude of, but we do have a lot of really great startups. And for example,
There was one of those maps around.
is there one?
Yeah, but the last version.
Is it 2004?
Yeah, we tried to get James Bennett.
You're right. Yeah, but that was 10 years ago.
No,
Yeah, but they're out there, right? And I'm always amazed because the A100, by the way, that's a group of Alberta tech entrepreneurs. And sort of the criteria to join is you have to have started a successful tech firm and exited. We got 60 plus members, which means there are at least that many good founders around. Not everyone's in the group, and our goal is to help the community. So that's why I'm here, by the way. But there's an ecosystem, and a lot of people don't know. And it's funny, even I didn't know. Like I met some people for the first time at A100. I had no idea these companies had existed, and it was some pretty spectacular exits, right? So it's here, and there is the capital.
Cool, awesome. And so any kind of final advice to startup founders here before we move on to Q&A?
I should have read that in some pre-questions. I haven't thought about that too much. Well, you know what? Entrepreneurship, it's a lifestyle, okay? And I think you need to understand that, right? I do come from the school that I'm not sure about the nurture and nature part exactly, how much you have to be born, but I know you can grow a lot of entrepreneurial skills, and I think every one of us has a little bit of entrepreneur in you, right? But you have to understand what your risk level is and your comfort, because it's not an easy ride. I think it's very rewarding, right? I love I have no regrets at all, ever, never, because I love my independence, right?
Yeah.
I love being able to essentially call my own shots. I'm comfortable accepting that risk, right? I love learning, right? So for young entrepreneurs that are coming out, or people who are wanting midlife go into entrepreneur situation, so I think you should do your homework and understand what level of risk you're willing to take. When your eyes open, right? Talk to your loved ones, spouses, girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever, whoever's involved in your life to make sure they understand. Because you need their support. And you need to have a team, by the way. I never talked about that. But actually, ever noticed I've had fellow travelers all along every story I had other cohorts in with me because I think entrepreneurs are a team sport. If you're working by yourself, get out there and speed date, find somebody to work with. Because I struggle with I don't know any entrepreneurs who are successful without a team behind them. Right? So don't if you follow the lead startup, you can do it with a lot less risk. I think I don't know if it's a golden age, but it's a huge, wonderful opportunity today because the technologies are here to do so many things you couldn't do. Right? I know there's some young entrepreneurs here who just discovered the wonders of Alibaba in the last year, right? The Chinese manufacturing site. You can get prototypes made up of electronics devices for next to nothing. We're talking hundreds or thousands of dollars, not hundreds of thousands of dollars to have prototypes made in weeks, not years, weeks, right? It's an amazing opportunity. Most people are completely unaware, right? We should actually have a whole class of how to procure through Alibaba, right? So, but most people aren't aware of that. Those opportunities have only come up in the last few years, right?
Yeah.
Smartphone technology, ubiquitous mobile devices have opening up all kinds of opportunities, right? And besides, by the way, read Lead Startup. I would highly suggest reading Clayton Christensen's Innovator's Dilemma and understand disruptive innovation because we're coming in. Read articles about that because we're coming into that phase again, right? A lot of disruptive innovations are coming along, right? Smartphones have completely turned everything upside down. Even I missed that, right? I mean, I was testing some product about a year ago and I forgot. I didn't realize how many people used smartphones as their primary access to the internet, right? And certainly under 25, it's like 90%.
Yeah.
Right.
Use it more than a computer.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, right? And in fact, with my Project X here, round peg, we're going to call it, we discovered that it's over 83% with our target, which is essentially professionals, right? Not students, but professionals. So I think our average age of our last little test was something like 42. And 83% of the access to our application was through this. And we had this big slapping forehead out. My screaming was me and her because it was like we didn't optimize our experience for mobile. So even I'm just like, okay, it happened so fast because we didn't realize how fast the transition. We didn't realize how fast the transition was. Right?
Yeah.
Those are game changers. There's other things going on right now, and the information's all out there. So go and explore, read, network. So I'll give you So if you look at the innovators' skills that you should sort of grow, observe, like look around, just look at everything, question everything that you see, and try to look this cover to see what the story is, right? Why didn't Wind Mobile bid on the Spectrum on the new Spectrum auction for cellular phones, right? Why is Videotron maybe going to enter the cell phone market? What's going on with the cell phone market? Do a little bit of research. It's nothing to do with what you're doing, but the point is that piece of information will come back to play, right? And the more you do, the ahead of it. I mean, I read ferociously everything. I talk to people, I gather data, and I really believe in the concept of slow hunch that Steve Johnson talks about.
Yeah.
So observe, ask lots of questions. I do believe there's no stupid questions. Right? Some think my questions are screw that. I'm a little cocky that way, but you know what? There are no stupid questions. Ask lots of questions. Question everything. Experiment. Right? Network. Come to these kind of events. Right? Listen to other ideas. Even though it may not be up your industry area that you're in or your domain, there are ideas that cross-pollinate all the time. I'm always stunned by things that other guys are doing in other places I hadn't thought about. Wow, holy man, that's really clever. When I think about how does that apply to me? How did they get there? I didn't even know that was possible, right? And the last thing they cut was the social thinking. That's back to you got to do these things and it'll all come together. And that's like don't force it, right? Just start doing these things, it'll build. It's all aggregation. It's one of those things you accumulate, and one day it'll all start to come. So, and you're never too late to do it, right? So,
So we should probably move on to Q&A, and so we can start with some questions. And if you have a question, just stand up. And any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks so much for your time. My name is Tina. I just wanted to find out from you what's motivating you these days aside from bicycles.
too many things. Right now, I'm actually trying to pare down all the interesting hobbies I've been looking at, right? So, I was doing a lot of executive coaching, and I've decided executive coaching is too emotional. I didn't bring up that part. So, as part of what I do coaching. And I found it, again, I was doing my own personal experiment. So I didn't go all in. I did the Royal Roads Executive Coaching Program, got my International Coaching Federation certification, blah, blah, blah. It was good, because sometimes I need to learn the official way. I can't always do it on my own time. If I take a course with other people, I do a better job of learning. But I discovered pretty quickly that I am way too empathetic. I get in the heads of my clients, and I want to be with them and help them. It's emotionally draining. So I'm trying to figure out what my portfolio, to be honest, is right now. Right. So some things are being. So I love teaching, so I'm continuing with the university. I love lead startup. I'm involved with Startup Calgary and UEnd. I get some angel investments coming my way to look at. I'm not so sure about that. We'll see what happens. So I'm just sort of playing things loose right now. I've never been a planner, by the way. So I know that may find it a little weird. So I never had, in 10 years I'm going to be this, right? Or 5 years I'll do these 5 things. I don't have those kind of lists. I have ideas what I'd like to do sometime. I'd love to do stand-up comedy one day. Seriously, I would love to do stand-up comedy. I've got a mini routine made up, and I've taken some workshops, but am I going to activate, push that button?
You can push that button now.
It's like, hold on, hey, just flew from Cleveland. Boy, my arms are down. I get tired. Anyways, I got my own material, but am I going to push that button? I got it in the inventory, right? And so I'm not in a hurry, and when the timing is right, I might go there, I might not. I love to drive one of my cars in the Target, Newfoundland, right? I got a bunch of stupid cars in my garage that I spent way too much money on, and they're collecting literally under piles of dust because I've done the bicycle thing instead, because back to that time thing. And maybe I'll go back and do that. And maybe this other startup with Brian and I'll go somewhere. But I have the luxury, I've got to admit right now, I've had multiple successful startups. I've crystallized, I'm doing fine financially, and I have the flexibility, but not in a hurry. But I want to enjoy life. I want to do things I like to do, and I have no idea. I always shake my head. I'm at an age where my friends are starting to think about early retirement, and they're talking about golfing in Phoenix. Well, I don't like golfing, but I could ride my bike in Phoenix or play really hockey all day, but I couldn't do that every day, right? It's not me. I like getting out, meeting people, talking. I love ideas, and so I'm going to stay involved with something like that. And yeah.
Great. Any more questions? Yeah, go ahead in the back.
And thanks for coming today. You spoke about how challenging it is emotionally, just as an executive coach. Obviously, you've been doing multiple times being the entrepreneur yourself.
Yeah.
They often talk about bipolar syndrome being the entrepreneur's disease. The question is, you talked about humility and making sure you go test, you make sure you come back to be able to pivot and all that. But you also have that ego component of, the confidence in yourself. How do you balance? How do you balance the two? I'm sure everybody has their own play, but is team part of that, or what?
You're hitting a bunch. It is a bunch. I don't think there's one right answer. Picking the right team that balances. Like the last thing I think you want to do is a team that's all like-minded. That's crazy talk, right? People do that all the time. You pick people. It's like people that are like you. Of course, you drive the bus off the cliff together because you think exactly the same. We're wonderful, boom, right? You have to talk to my wife because humility, I don't know, I'm pretty cocky sometimes. But I get knocked down enough that I do shake my head sometimes, because I have moments of like, oh my God, why did I know myself? I'm way over my head. Right? So I don't think that feeling ever, I'm just being honest. Like, I don't know about other guys, but I do have those feelings. I have back to my baby's not, oh my God, what did we create? This is awful, right? So, having good friends and family supporting you. I have a great cohort of colleagues I've kept in touch with. But you know, I'm an extroverted thinker too, right? So I like that. So I can't speak for the introverts as much. I just know that I have lots of places to get my ego checked, rechecked. I get support from those kind of people. I think it's important to get out there. I also learned, you know what, an interesting lesson I learned a long time ago was, you know what, and my father just told me, just ignore the naysayers. And before the word was, there's a Chinese word, I'm trying to remember, it's a Chinese word I won't get into, but it's basically, you know, the internet trolls? There's a word for that in Chinese, right? And just ignore the internet trolls. Like, they're just pissheads. They're gonna take you down no matter what. They hate success. They're gonna tell you you're wrong. Ignore those people, right? I mean, you want to listen to criticism. You want to listen to legitimate, you know, issues that you may have, but just ignore those. You got to have some belief in yourself, right? I know it sounds very Tony Robbins-esque, right? But it's true. I mean, I do have an ego. There's no doubt about it. And I love reading Malcolm Gladwell. Like, I know the critics say he oversimplifies stuff, but in his stuff there are some really good kernels of truth. And I, you know, growing up, in a house, we didn't have much money when I was a kid. And Brad knows that. I drove up to his cottage and my 66 Valkyrie was our family car with a 2 AM radio. We had nothing, right? Really, my father just scraped by. He owed a lot of money to relatives who helped fund his education, right? And so I worked all kinds of terrible jobs, you know, construction, and, you know, washing dishes in Chinese kitchens, and taking slop pails out. I mean, that taught me humility. I understood how a lot of people's lives really worked, right? And I knew what the value of hard work. So you know, as Malcolm Gladwell does, you know, in his book Outliers, those disadvantages turn into some kind of advantages. That adversity made me stronger, right? And I love Nietzsche. But what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. There's some truth in that. So those things keep me grounded, right? And you know, I see a lot of people too here that just are not grounded, right? In this town, there's a lot of people throwing their money around, big egos. And, you know what? To each his own. But I don't associate with those people. I try to stay away from it. I don't like those kind of social events, for example. So I stay with people I like, right? So I have a motto. I don't actually believe in karma, but I like the idea of karma, right? So I kind of think that way. Right? So.
Any more questions? Yes.
Saw all the principles of lean startup, but yet you're an academic, because it seems like it could be opposite. You know, well, at least when I went to business school, they always taught the business plan, huge plan.
And I apologize every time I teach lean startup. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to deprogram you, and there's nothing wrong with business planning. Stefan's laughing because I just did this, right? So there's nothing wrong with business planning. And lean startup doesn't mean you throw out business plans completely. But the focus isn't on traditional, okay? So I don't want to oversimplify, but traditional business plans, it's kind of like the Bible, the tome. You build this big business plan and then you execute the plan, right? Everyone knows it's kind of a waterfall thing. Figure it out, analyze it. You got the 5-year plan, you got the 1-year plan in detail, and you start building towards it. And everyone knows none of these plans ever have iterations, like learn something, maybe change the plan, right? And we used to build systems that way. It was almost a waterfall method. You got the specification from the business users. You started to code the system. Then you had a QA phase. And of course, the QA phase assumed there was only minor mistakes. And then you went live. It never worked that way, right? You always had this massive meltdown halfway through the project when you realized you're going in the wrong direction, right? So the academics of the planning and the exercise. So I had a motto, I actually forgot about it, but we used to, and I still do this, we always plan, but we rip up the plans as soon as we're done. In other words, we put it on the shelf. We do it so it informs us, right? We understand the fundamentals, we do the work. We don't over-engineer our plans, but you need to understand what's going on. But the plan is not the map, right? The plan just informs. It's almost like a reconnaissance. You look over the horizon, you can see what's out there, you can see what's going on. You still have to get out there, experiment, try things, and read the market, read your customers, and there's all those things going on. So business planning is important, but you know what I mean. There's a bit of a seismic shift in that world, right? I mean, lots of people are debating the efficacy of traditional business planning methods. You know, MBA schools is a big debate, right? In my master's program, I did some of those kind of courses down, and I look back on it. You know, fundamentals are fine, but it's just the application of it, right? So, hope that helps.
Any more questions? Maybe we can have one or two more. One more question. Last question. Anyone?
Oh, there's one back there, I see.
Okay, Brendan in the back. Who is it? Okay, yeah.
My name is Lily, and I have a question for you. Just as because you're such an active person, you do so many different activities. How do you deal with stress? Which advice would you give to, especially for people who start and they don't have this tolerance for stress yet? It's very important.
It's a good question. There's something in me that I don't have a problem with. I don't know what stress is in the tradition. When people talk about stress, I call that worry, right? I don't think of it as stress. It's just like daily worry to me, right? And I guess somewhere along the lines, I got the right genetics for parenting, but you can roll with it, right? And what's the worst? So when I get stressed, it's about health, right? Or family disasters, death, illness, whatever. That stresses me. Work never stressed me. Because I have an attitude of, you know what, if I got my health, I got family and friends, I can always come back again and start again, right? And I mean, maybe coming from a family that had that basically refugee status, coming with nothing. I remember my toy box fit in one of those little mandarin orange boxes that were that really crappy wood that you get slivers on. Kids. That's all my toys fit into that box. I was about 12 years old. And I was great. I mean, I had enough toys. My brother and I shared. But I remember that. I said, there were great times. I'm a little nostalgic. I got to admit. That's back to my emotion. I can get sucked into nostalgia, and I understand. I started realizing the best times I ever had nothing to do with that expensive present I got, or I had those moments of I achieved it, got the car I wanted, and it was okay. I was excited for a while, then the car just became a car. The things I remember best was, playing high school football with my kid brother, right? Birth of my first son, my first kiss and all that kind of stuff, right? That was all more important than those things. So I play that back, and when I have those moments of freaking out or stressing out or having a bad day, and trust me, I will rant, and I'm a little bipolar. So at Ideaca, they coined it the Hunami. So it's coming. The steam is building, and it's like, what were you guys thinking, right? But it's always about people issues, by the way. I never get excited about business issues, about how people treat each other. But when those stress moments come, I get my perspective back by going, you know what? I'm okay. I got my health. My family's okay. Everyone's thriving. So what am I getting all my knickers in a twist? Yeah, I'm good. And you talk to other entrepreneurs, win some, lose some, up $1 million, down $1 million, whatever it is. Yeah. There's some truth in that mentality, right? Because I feel I can come back. And worst case, I'm a bike mechanic. Yeah. I love being a bike mechanic. Right? Pay me $15 an hour. I don't have to worry about anything. Just assemble these bikes. I'm okay with that. And deep in my heart, I am. I don't have an issue with that. And the other thing, I never got wrapped up in status. That's something else. I think that's really important in this town. I mean, I'm going to get on my pulpit on this one. It's like, my God, it's easy to get caught up with symbols of status, and you have to achieve. And, it's that classic comparing what I got. Right? I missed my 30th and my 10th high school reunion. Right? And it was funny because I did go to my 25th high school reunion for my Winnipeg school. They kind of made me an honorary member because I got yanked at the last minute because I went to that school for 4 years. And it was funny because I decided to go, and they were talking about how everyone was strutting in their 10th high school, how great life is. And 25th year, things have happened and knocked you down a bit. You've had a few more life lessons and much more perspective. And then you realize everyone had the same message. It was a good group of people, but it was what's most important in life, right? Family, health, friends, relationships. Now I'm just not Tony Robbins. So go out there, kiss your mom, you make up with your brother, whatever it is, right? Yeah. So that's why stress disappears when I get that perspective back. I try to be healthy. Everyone knows I'm the most notorious junk food junkie out there. I love crap. And I'm a crap eating machine, right? But I have little hacks that I do, right? So I walk everywhere I can. You know, I built a small workout facility in my home. I've always had a workout facility at home, so I realized, why am I driving to a fitness club when I'll just do the workout? And it drives my wife nuts, by the way, because I will be watching TV with her at the commercial. Most people go get a snack. I'll go out and pop off a couple bench presses and come back, right? So I do little things like that to fit in. I figured these things out over time. And I've also made decisions what's important, right? So being there for my kids was really important. Even as busy I am, I had to figure out how to make that work, right? I'm not saying, I mean, I've made lots of mistakes. My sons will tell you about parenting mistakes another time. My oldest son, buy him a beer, he's 21, he's good with that, he'll tell you lots of good stories. But I try to keep that perspective.
Yeah, so basically, stressing about your startup is a first world problem.
Totally, you nailed exactly. Listen to this, man. It's a first world problem, okay?
Yeah.
And most of our problems are first world problems, right? I mean, I was fuming. I was trying to drive here across the bridge, 14. Brad texted me, then he chastised me for answering his text in the car. But I told him technically I wasn't driving. I was parked on the bridge, right? So the funny part, I was getting stressed because I said, "I thought this thing started at 6. Why are you texting me at 5:30?" And that was the classic. I had to calm down. Okay. I did actually go through that. I'm okay. It's okay. It's at 6. It's just Brad getting me going.
You should have seen me.
It was Andrew getting me. I calmed down. We'll get there. Traffic's eventually get there.
Yeah. Just everyone was just so excited to hear you. They were all
There you go.
ready and waiting for them in. Well, with that, thanks a lot, Evan, for taking the time to.